Hello everyone, Mappy here with another RPG Maker Quickie, and this one's gonna be a bit of a weird one. So this is Professor McLogic Saves the Day. I have had this game on computers I've owned in one sense or another for almost 15 years. Mostly because I think I had it... Remember, I downloaded this in high school, and it's just been in my files that have been shoveled between computers over time. So what is this game? Well, we might as well go in and see what it is. Select your character. Very important choice. Which of you looks the most, I really like this guy. Alright, so first of all, brace yourselves. Yes, I would like to view the game info, and yeah, no, I don't know why. I do not understand that game design, but we'll get into weirdness later. You are Professor McLogic, the finest logic-type professor ever. In this game, you will travel to many faraway lands and converse with the inhabitants, but beware, for many liars will cross your path, and it's up to you to determine who you can trust! 3 exclamation marks. Just about everything by GameMaker, playtesters, those 4 people, custom car sprites by one, and music, and then eyes in the bottom right corner. Yeah, this is a game from a different era. The puzzles in this game are based off those in tricky logic puzzles by Norman D. Willis. Yes, this is a game that someone made in RPG Maker 2003. That's just a bunch of random logic puzzles. And when I say random, I mean it actually... They built an entire, puzzle randomization engine in RPG Maker 2003. It's a thing that exists. Let's view info. The city of Gunhold is such a cool place that scores of immortal beings have disguised themselves as humans and taken up residence there. Unfortunately, the city has an ordinance allowing any person over 75 to receive a commemorative plaque on his or her birthday, courtesy of the city council. Officials fear that a bunch of immortals could easily run up a multi-billion-dollar deficit in commemorative plaques. The city has hired you, Professor McLogic, to determine which citizens are immortal, such that they can be encouraged to restrict themselves to a reasonable number of commemorative plaques. There are 3 classes of individuals you will meet in Gunhold. It is impossible to distinguish them on the basis of appearance, but their behavior falls into a set of strict categories. Fairies are angelic creatures whose statements are always true. Vampires are villainous creatures whose statements are always false. Mortals are torn between the 2 extremes, so their statements will alternate between true and false, but not necessarily in that order. Ah yes, so Professor McLogic Saves the Day is very much on the side of things where, hey, can't trust those vampires. But yeah, if Lily is a fairy, all statements are true. She likes all 3 items. If Lily is a vampire, all 3 statements are lies. She hates all 3 items. If she's immortal, the statements alternate between truth and falsehood. Lily either likes fuchsia, hates donuts, and likes the number 8, or she hates fuchsia, likes donuts, and hates the number 8, which is a very important thing to know if you were preparing a present for her birthday. When you've determined the class of each person in the area, find the mailbox to confirm your solution, and move on to the next area. Once you've successfully scoured enough areas, your example will inspire the rest of the citizens to come forward on their own, and the mission will be completed. Yep, let's play the scenario. So yeah, this is how this is gonna work. Hit enter. I have a controller. Yep, there's a timer up in the corner. The timer, I don't think there's really any purpose behind it, but yes. Reagan and I are not of the same class, and we have to check. Jason is a fairy, Jason is a vampire, Jason is mortal. I don't know yet. I don't know that yet because it actually based off what Reagan says. Reagan says that she is a vampire. Jason and I are the same class. That means that she has to be mortal, so both of them are mortals. Why does she have to be immortal? Because if she's a vampire, she can't say that she's a vampire. If she's a fairy, she can't say that she's a vampire. And hey, you're immortal, you're just lying to me. Frickin' normies. Professor McLogic sees through your lies, your deceptions. I'm a vampire. You are immortal. So, okay, so the statement, I am a fairy, is something that literally all three of them can say. I am immortal is something that only a mortal or a vampire can say, and I am a vampire is something that only a mortal can say. Sky and I are the same class. I am not a vampire. You are a vampire. The reason why Priya is a vampire is because, let's say that she was immortal. If she was immortal, then the earlier comment where it's like, I am the same class as my friend over there, would be, hey, that would be the true one, and then she's like, I'm not a vampire. Well, that would have to be a lie, so she'd have to be a vampire, so she's a vampire. Found you. Stop racking up the... Look, we are already spending enough budget on commemorative plaques. Flukes. Where's the mailbox? Time is wasting. They pay me based off how quickly I do this. But yeah, no, I just felt like I should share this one because it's such a weird premise for a game. Like, not in general, but for RPG Maker. And it also is just like, it has this weird design sensibility. Like, I'm imagining that this was made as, like, by a teenager in their bedroom, mostly from stuff like the whole, like, oh yeah, here's your portrait, it just pops out your screen screaming at you. No reason. Anyway, Marcel is not a fairy. That means Marcel is immortal. Because a fairy couldn't say that, and a vampire couldn't say that. So you're immortal. What do you have to say for yourself? Marcel is not a fairy. Okay, so that means you are either a mortal or a fairy. Ah, you are a fairy, Boris. Okay, but you'd think that... Okay, so given how this commemorative plaque thing works and the strict rules everyone runs by, you'd think that they would catch the vampires immediately because they would be going to the commemorative plaque office and be like, hello, it is my... And they'd be like, can I have a commemorative plaque? It is totally my later birthday. It is after I am older than 75, and they'd be like, You're 20. No, you're a vampire, you are lying to me. Whereas the fairies would just be like, hi, it's my 297th birthday, and they'd be like, come on, we've already given you like 5. Janine is not a vampire. Kyle is not a vampire. Okay, so Coleridge here says that both of his friends aren't vampires. We'll see if that's true. Kai is a fairy. I'm a vampire. Okay. So you have to be mortal, and that means Kai is a fairy. So you're a fairy. Janine is not a vampire. You're a fairy. And you said that both of them weren't vampires? Yeah, so you're a fairy as well. We've got 2 of these commemorative plaque hogs. Honestly, though, you have to wonder about why a city has... Okay, I can understand why a city would have, like, a commemorative, like, congratulations, you've lived many, many years in our shithole of a city setup. But, also, it just occurred to me, I don't have anything to... I've got a sheet of paper right here, so I can write things down if I need to. What I vaguely remember about this game from when I was younger was it was really easy in the first few, and then there were like a bunch of people to keep track of. Carolyn is not immortal, or I'm just gonna do a little note that you say Carolyn's not immortal, and Yvonne's not immortal. Okay. We don't know yet. Because she didn't say anything about herself. Carolyn says that she's not a fairy, which means that Carolyn has to be mortal, which means our friend over there, I'm sorry, I'm so terrible with names, can't be a fairy. She could still be immortal, though. Yvonne is a fairy. Yvonne is not a fairy. We know this because... Wait. You're mortal. Carolyn, I need to talk to you again. Okay, you're saying you're not a fairy, that's a true statement. Yvonne is a fairy, that's a lie. So Yvonne is not... Oops. At least you can change it. Okay, hey. Carolyn and I are not the same class, so... And whatever your name is. Okay. So, your first comment is that you are not equal to Carolyn. So you're saying you're not immortal. Okay. So, she could say that if she was a fairy, but we know she's not a fairy. She could say that if she was a vampire. Actually, no, she could not say that if she was a vampire because we know that Carolyn is immortal. So Yvonne has to be immortal as well. Okay, so we have that Carolyn is mortal, Yvonne is mortal. Okay. Eventually I'm going to get this wrong and Professor McLogic is going to look very silly. Okay, you're lying in both cases, you're a vampire. So, like... okay, so the Immortals, I wonder, like, how do they... Okay, I guess, like, it's open knowledge... Actually, wait. Shouldn't they know that they're Immortals? Like, just on the basis of, like, hi, I came here to get the commemorative plaque, and it's like, well, you look like you're 30. Can you care to explain? And they're like, it's because I age gracefully. Unless they're a fairy, in which case they go like, oh no, it's because I'm a fairy. Okay, so Adelaide says that, James is not mortal. Not since the sacrifice. And that she and David are the same class. I don't know yet. There we go. So David says that James is not mortal. So, David and Adelaide are agreeing. And they're both agreeing. I don't know yet. Let's see what David has to say for himself. Sorry, James. James says that James is not a vampire, which is a statement that literally everyone can say. She is saying... Sorry, James is saying that Adelaide is mortal. Okay, I don't know yet. So let's go down the list. Let's presume that... Okay, so Adelaide cannot be a vampire. The reason why I say that Adelaide can't be a vampire is then she would be disagreeing with both things that Dave is saying. So Dave would have to... But since they're saying the same thing, Dave would also have to be a vampire, which would mean that their second thing they say is true, so Adelaide can't be a vampire, Dave can't be a vampire. Suppose Adelaide is immortal. If Adelaide is mortal, then... Okay. Sorry, my brain just kind of did a blurp. Okay, let's assume if Adelaide and David are both fairies, that means that James is not immortal. That would mean he would have to be a vampire, and that would be a lie. So what we're gonna do is, James, I'm sorry, but you're mortal, and the other two are mortal as well. And in both cases, for Adelaide and David, they're agreeing on their second comment that they are the same. And watch, Professor McLogic is now going to get yelled at because bad logic, no good. Oh, what did I mess up? Oh! Oh no! Oh no! I'm sorry, Professor. I'm sorry. You might be the ultimate logic type professor, but I am not. Okay, so we have Vernier, who says that Basil is a fairy. And he says that Basil is not equal to Werner. Okay. I don't know yet. Lucian says that Werner is mortal and that Basil is a vampire. I don't know yet. Oh, hey, it's Elvis, I think. So, Basil says that Lucian is not mortal. I don't know yet. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little chart, everyone. Oh lord. So we're gonna have Werner, Lucian, Basil, fairy, mortal, vampire. You know, it just occurred to me that you can't see me do any of this note-taking. I have no way of actually recording this. Just rest assured. Just rest assured that I am doing such a thing. Okay, so let's start off with the assumption that Werner is a fairy. Okay? That means that Basil is also a fairy. Ah, no, I can't do that. Werner cannot be a fairy. Because if he is a fairy, then Basil is also a fairy, and then there's this... Basically, it doesn't work. It does not work. Okay, so let's assume that Werner is a vampire. If Werner is a vampire, then Basil can be a mortal or a vampire, and but they'd have to be the same, so that then Basil would be a vampire, and Lucian would be immortal. How... Actually, yeah, that would work. Okay, so we've got a vampire, we've got a mortal, and a vampire. You know, you get this in like some logic puzzle collections, and I think I just screwed up. Nope, you're vampires. You get this in some like logic puzzle collections where you have some like logician who has the ultimate power of conviction. Also, look at that custom car. It's definitely not like traced over a photograph. Marie says that Blake is a vampire. Marie says Blake equals vampire. I mean, didn't we... No, never mind. Marie says that she is not mortal. Oh well, that's gonna be a problem. I just realized that so I've been doing like little initials on a sheet of paper, and the initial I've been using for mortal is the same one that I was using for Marie, so I'm gonna underline when people comment about Marie. Oh no! Guys, why did you give me so many, Okay, so Marvin, you get an overline. Aren't you special? And Blake says that he is not a vampire. Disagreement with Marie. We'll have to see about that. So Marvin says that Blake is not mortal, and that Marie is not immortal. Oh dear. Okay, so let's dupe. Fairy, mortal, vampire, FMV. So let's assume for a second that Marie is a fairy. If Marie is a fairy, that means that Blake is a vampire. And, well, yeah, she's telling the truth that she's not immortal. Okay, so if Blake is a vampire, then that works, and that works. Yep, that's consistent. And yeah, so it's two fairies and a vampire. So literally everyone here is stealing commemorative plaques. Okay, they're not stealing them, but they're taking more than their fair share. I kinda doubt that it's multi-billion dollars, though. That seems a little extreme. You'd think that after a while, the council would just vote on cheaper plaques. There we go. Right. I think I might just finish Gunhold and then call it a day. Okay, here we go. Here's where it gets interesting. Alright. Niels. Niels says Bryce is not mortal. Niels says Bryce is a fairy. Niels, you are very obsessed with this Bryce person. Trent says that Spike is mortal, and that Spike is a vampire. I somehow think that that's not consistent, my friend. Spike says that Trent is a vampire. That seems plausible. And that Niels is not a fairy. Okay, I don't know yet. And you, my friend, Bryce says that Niels is not a fairy. And that Trent is not a vampire. So, okay. Let's make our little chart again. So on one side we're gonna have NSTB, and at the top we're gonna have FMV. Okay. So let's assume for a second that Niels is a fairy. In that case, then our friend Bryce has to be a fairy, because Neil is like, oh wait, no, that's impossible. If Niels was a fairy, he commented that Bryce is not immortal, and Bryce is a fairy. But then going over to where what Bryce just said, Bryce said that Niels is not a fairy. So, that is impossible. Excellent, okay. We also have that T person. Oh god, this is how quickly I forget names. Honestly, like this is. I'm actually trying to remember the names because they help me. They would theoretically help like solve puzzles, but no, I just don't remember them. Which makes the fact that when I was younger, I was trying to solve these by memory without writing anything down even more like, why was I doing that? So, person whose name starts with a T clearly can't be a fairy because they're like, well, Spike's immortal and Spike is a vampire simultaneously. So, assume that Spike is a fairy. If Spike is a fairy, that means that T is a vampire, which is consistent, and that Niels is not a fairy, which we already know is the case. So that's consistent so far. Then we get to Bryce. With Bryce, we know that okay, so we get that Bryce is mortal. Why? Because Bryce said that Niels is not a fairy, which has to be true, and that T is not a vampire. So, okay. I've got a bug flying around. It was like, oh, spooky. Okay. So we have that Bryce is immortal, which means that Niels is a vampire. You sneaky, sneaky guy. Okay, so Bryce is immortal. You know, it's odd, because we're looking for immortals. Going, oh yeah, they're immortal. It sounds different. Okay. So this is Spike. Spike has to be a fairy. Trent is a vampire. Come on, man. Couldn't you have picked, like, two different people to talk about? Just so you weren't blatantly obvious? Like, Niels here. Niels is... Okay, no. Niels is also a liar. But, a little bit of hiding it, because... The comments were immediately contradictory. Okay. But yeah, as you probably noticed, once they get up to the 4, it gets kind of complicated. Zoe says that Zoe is mortal, a likely story, and that Adelaide is not a vampire. Again, a likely story. We don't know anything about you. Adelaide says that Zoe is mortal. Huh, likely story. We don't know yet. James says that Salvador is a vampire. And that Adelaide is immortal. Not immortal, amortal. And Salvador says that Zoe, not a vampire. But that Adelaide is a vampire. Okay, we don't know yet. So let's put down our controller again and look down at my sheet and go, boy, I wish I picked up a clean sheet of paper and not this. It's like this map I doodled for fun one day. And I'm just kind of writing on a corner. Okay, so we have A, J, S, and Z, F, M, V across the top. So, let's assume that Adelaide is a fairy. That means that Zoe is immortal. Is this possible? No, that's not possible because then Zoe would be telling the truth when she said, "Oh, I'm immortal," but she would have to be lying when she says Adelaide is not a vampire, which would mean that Adelaide would have to be a vampire, which can't be the case if Adelaide is a fairy. So, no fairy for Adelaide. Okay, so, James, let's assume that you're a fairy. If you're a fairy, then Salvador has to be a vampire. What would that, okay, Salvador would have to be a vampire, and Adelaide would have to be immortal. So what would this imply? Okay, if Salvador was a vampire, that would mean that Zoe has to be a vampire, and that Adelaide couldn't be a vampire. Which, hey, we already would have that in this case that she's immortal, so hey, we're still in consistency territory. Oh wait, no, because if Zoe was lying, then Adelaide would have to be a vampire. So, I'm sorry, James, but you just demonstrated that you are also a vampire. Sorry that you're not a fairy. Okay, so let's go ahead. Salvatore. What if you were a fairy? If you were a fairy, then we know that Zoe is not a vampire. But we know that Adelaide would have to be a vampire. And Adelaide would be so we have that she's not, that we should, we have, oh wait, no, that's inconsistent. Never mind, because we run into a case where Adelaide would simultaneously have to be a vampire and not a vampire. Tricky people. So now we're at the what if Zoe were a fairy? So if Zoe was a fairy, Zoe can't be a fairy, because if Zoe was a fairy, her first thing is that, oh yeah, I'm immortal, which a fairy can't say. So we don't have any fairies in this go around. Okay, starting back at the top. What if Adelaide was a vampire? Then we have that Zoe can't be immortal, so she's a vampire. Which is consistent, because she says, oh, I'm immortal, which a vampire would say. And oh, Adelaide isn't a vampire, which Adelaide's a vampire, so a vampire could say that. Cool. Alright, so we have that. And we have... So Salvador would have to be immortal, because one of those comments that Zoe is a vampire would be false. Whereas the other one, where Adelaide's a vampire, is true. So, hey, that's the defining characteristic of mortals. Unlike people who are immortal, we mortals are capable of both truth and lies. We didn't have to choose back in the, conclave of 87. Dear Lord, I hope someone's actually still watching this and it's not just me rambling to an empty room. I would fully understand if no one's still watching this. I would also hope that people are, doing McLogic puzzles themselves. Because, hey, that's just fun. Okay, so Salvador's... So we'd have two lies, so, okay. So we have that... Salvador, you are the only mortal here. Everyone else, you are all vampires. Guys. So I wonder, when we're we have fairies and vampires, do you think you'd also be able to detect the vampires by the fact that, oh yeah, in this particular neighborhood, there's a lot of people lose a lot of blood. Okay, good. I spent so much time rambling there. Alright, you. Elizabeth. Elizabeth says that Sean's not a vampire! Why would you accuse Sean of such things? I have half a mind to... Okay, Elizabeth says that she's not a vampire. Which, again, is, is the safest thing to say. I don't know yet. You. Elizabeth... Okay, so Marcel says that... Marcel, you are underlined. Says that Marcel and Elizabeth are the same. Sorry, are not the same. And that Elizabeth is mortal. Elizabeth is doomed to die. Not like Marcel. Marcel is eternal. Sean says that Marcel is not a fairy. And that Elizabeth is not a fairy. Huh. What an predicament. I don't know. I don't know yet. Need to talk to everyone. Crystal, who, some of you probably noticed, no one wants to talk about Crystal. Crystal says that Marcel is not a vampire. And that Sean and her are not the same. And as our first 3-comment person, she is saying that she is not mortal. Okay, so I do believe this is the last puzzle we're going to be doing, which is good because this has been going on for quite a while. Okay, so we have E, M, S, and K. Yes, I know that's not alphabetical order. I'm fine with this. Okay, so let's assume for a second that... Wow, okay. Bug is flying around like its life depends on it. Which it really doesn't. It's like nothing else is happening in this room. I don't even know how it got up here. But anyway. Let's assume that Elizabeth is a fairy. Actually, no. Let's go for a slightly simpler one. Elizabeth is immortal. Why is this simpler? Because she has a comment where she says she's not a vampire, and if she's mortal, that means the other one's a lie. Which means that Sean has to be a vampire. If Sean is a vampire, we have that Marcel has to be a fairy. But that Eileen Was it Elizabeth or Eileen? E-girl. Oh, no, that means something. The lady whose name starts with an E, she cannot be immortal. Which is actually really annoying, because, that would actually have been really helpful. Okay. So actually, let's start off with if Sean is a fairy, because we know that our E-friend is not a mortal, the fact that Sean says that she can't be a fairy means that she would be a vampire. And if she was a vampire, that would mean that he would have to be a vampire, so that's logically inconsistent. We can't be having that. No logical Professor McLogic does not accept such things. Okay, so we've got that. What happens if Sean is a vampire? If Sean is a vampire, then both Marcel and Elizabeth Lean name E-Lady both have to be fairies. If E-Lady is a fairy, then oh no, that's not consistent either. So we have 100% that Sean is mortal. So what does that get us? Well, that means that Eileen makes a true statement in saying that Sean is not a vampire, so she's a fairy. Excellent. So Marcel says that she's mortal, so that has to be a lie. So he has to be immortal, because if he was a vampire, he would say that he and Eileen, Emily, Elizabeth, Eleanor. Eventually, I will say the E name that belongs to that person. So yeah, Marcel, mortal. Let's go. And then we get to Crystal. I was about to call her Kira, but then I looked over at my screen and it was like, no, it literally says right there that her name is Crystal. Why am I so terrible with names? Okay, so we've actually not defined anything about Crystal yet. However, we know that her first statement, which is that Marcel is not a vampire, is true. Yay! So that leaves us two possibilities. Either she's immortal, in which case she's lying when she says that she is not the same type that Sean is not the same type as Crystal. That would be a lie. But that would also make the last comment she has, which is that she is not immortal, a lie. So, she is a fairy. Which leaves us with Crystal is a fairy. Sean is mortal. Okay, so it was Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a fairy. And Marcel is mortal. I hope I didn't get this one wrong. Yes, I finished. Only took me 35 minutes to clear Gunhold City. Completed! Excellent! Celebration! At last, the immortal beings have discovered they do not have to hide their true forms. It is darn expensive when they do. In gratitude, the city has commissioned a special commemorative plaque just for you, taking money from next year's police budget to fund it. Professor McLogic, you are awesome. And honestly, I think that's a more appropriate use of that money. Yeah! Congratulations! You beat the scenario in 34 minutes and 41 seconds. This is a new record. Yeah! So, yeah, this seems like a game you could, like, speedrun or whatever. Okay, so if I remember correctly, yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 10 different scenarios here, and all of them change up the rules. Like, for example, of the other two that are available, Mercy Ravine has animals that either... Okay, let me see if I can remember. Okay, so in that one, you have animals that are healthy or rabid, and it's a case where I think it's like the rabbit animals lie, but the other ones tell the truth. I can't remember. Okay, so I can't remember exactly what the thing is there. I just know that it has something to do with like rabbit animals. The School of Philosophy is actually a really kind of interesting one, in that it's basic. You're not trying to see like, okay, who's telling me the truth, but it's a case of you're like in a monastery, and everyone's forgotten who's like the master, who are the master monks and who are the students. And if I remember correctly, it's like the masters always would tell the truth about students, and the students would tell the truth about students, or it's something like that. Interesting puzzles. I had a lot of fun, honestly. It occurs to me after recording this, and yes, I'm going to upload this, that is probably not the kind of fun that is like super watchable, engrossing content. But yeah, no, I am going to have a link to the like a place where you can get this if you want to try it out, because it's a good time. Professor McLogic saves the day. Just hey, you want to solve some logic puzzles of escalating difficulty with 10 different variations that you unlock over time? It's good stuff. It's here. It's Professor McLogic. Anyway, I'm Mappy, and I will see you next time for whatever we do next. It will probably not be a logic puzzle game built in RPG Maker 2003. Anyway, take care and goodbye.